Good morning and welcome back. Hello, Mansfield. I am Eric Hamilton, and we are up with week 3 of the Financial Blueprint. So before we get into the details of what we're going to do in week 3, which is about understanding credit and debit, let's remember that this is a 12-week series that we put together. The purpose of this is to build on the fundamentals of financial literacy. So we're starting with our 100 level classes. So let's jump into this. But before we get into what we're going to talk about in week 3, let's recap our week 1 and 2. Week 1, we started with a basic platform, a foundation on financial literacy and budgeting. So we wanted to really understand that. Then we built on it with the budgeting fundamentals. Remember the 50-30-20 rule? 50% of our income goes to our needs, 30% goes to our wants, 20% goes to our savings. Now that we have our basics down, now it's time to talk about credit and debit. There's the two sides of the financial coin. So with that, let's start with a credit score. Now, have you ever applied for a credit in the past and you were rejected or approved? And they send you a letter, and on the letter it says why, and then there's a score on it? Yeah, that is a credit report. Now, understanding what is a credit score, it's a number somewhere between 350 and 850. In America, the average number is 715. But this 3-digit number, this is your key to success. It is important and imperative that we understand the importance of credit. Now, so this influences interest rates. That's the biggest piece. When you apply for a credit card, when you apply for an auto loan or a mortgage, the credit score is the biggest piece that makes the difference. I could be paying 5% while you're paying 22%. That's how big and important it is. Now, as I mentioned, some key factors. So your payment history is very important. It's your ability to pay consistently. Am I paying on the debt that I already have? Right, that's a big piece. How you're utilizing your credit. If you're maxing out your credit card, if you have a $1,000 limit and you've got $999 every single month, that's a problem. So for us, a quick tip. For me, I always say, number one, keep your utilization under 30%. My second quick tip, and it's not on this slide, but it's important to educate our kids. We have to make sure that our children understand the importance of credit and why it makes sense and why you have to pay attention to it. I've got some stories I could talk about, but that's for another day. All right, so let's flip to the other side, which is debt. So debt is not always a bad thing. It's important for us to understand debt. So there's two types of debts. It's almost like good and bad, bad and evil, whatever. All right, so we got good debt and we have bad debt. Let's start with good debt. Fundamentally, think of it as things that are going to help you grow, increase your net worth. So think of your mortgage. If you have a rental property and you have a mortgage on it, those are good debt. Those are perceived as good debt. Student loans, even though we all may despise and hate them, that is considered good debt. That's understandable debt. Well, what is bad debt? Well, think of things like high interest rate credit cards. If you have a 20+% interest rate, that is considered bad debt. So payday loans, oh my goodness. Whew. That is one of the worst kind of debts that you can have, right? It's a cycle. It's a venomous cycle that you get stuck in, and it can be tough to get out of it. Now, let's jump into our blueprint tip of the week. What is our blueprint tip of the week? It's the credit card do's and don'ts. So let's start with things that you should do. Number one, whenever possible, try to pay your balance in full. Now, that's not always possible, but when it is, try to pay it in full. Number two, I was guilty of this before I got married. I did not check my statements very often, okay? But now with my wife, we check our statements consistently because you will find things that may be erroneous on your credit report, or on your credit card statement. And then lastly, keep your credit card utilization low. We talked about that. Now let's talk about don'ts. You don't want to have too many accounts open at one particular time. That is perceived as a don't, perceived as not good, so be careful with that. I would also caution you, do not just pay you the minimal amount. You may have a $1,000 balance and it says just pay $15 and you're like, okay, great. Next time we're going to talk about this thing called compound interest. Compound interest can be your best friend or your worst enemy. Lastly, don't rely on credit cards for all living expenses if you can't afford it. And then if you go to the club, like don't buy bottles and put it on your credit card and you don't have money for it. Like don't do that kind of stuff, okay? It might look cool, but I'm telling you, it's not good. All right, so we always get a couple questions from the audience prior to me coming on. So we got a couple questions. The first one is, how do I get a copy of my credit report? Well, the credit report is pretty straightforward. There is a site called annualcreditreport.com. They will give you once a year, you have access to all 3 credit bureaus, the full report and scores. You can go to that site and you can get your credit report. There's no cost. You get one free every single year. There's a lot of other places that you can do it, but this is free. The second, you can go to your local credit union or bank or something and they'll do that for you. My recommendation is, if you are checking this, it is important that if you see something that doesn't look right, you address it immediately. Mistakes happen, even with the government. All right, so the second question that I got, somebody said, I have a lot of debt. What's the best way to reduce the debt? Whew, there's 2 common ways to reduce the debt. There's 2 methodologies that are very popular. One is the avalanche and the other is snowball. Think of avalanche as I'm starting high and I'm gonna take it low. So you're starting with your highest interest rate credit cards or whatever your debt is. You start there, you pay that high interest rate off, and then you just move down. So you're knocking out the interest rates. That's one way. The second way is snowball. Think about a snowball. It builds up. You start with the lowest amount on a credit card or whatever your debt is. You pay that off, and then you pay the next one off, and you pay the next one off. Quick example. Imagine you have 3 credit cards. One is a $100 limit, one is $500, one is $1,000. You're paying $50 a month on each one. So if I pay this first one off in 2 payments at $50, all right, so now that first one is done. Now I don't stop and just pay the $50. I take the $50 that I was paying and apply that to the $50 I'm paying on the $500. That's the snowball. 2 most popular ways. That is how you get rid of some of that debt. All right, so quick takeaways. Number 1, credit is a powerful tool, but it's important we have to understand how to use it. Debt can be our friend, but we have to understand the difference between good debt and bad debt. Not all debt is bad. All right, so join us next time I come back, which is our week 4. This is our final 100 level series of financial literacy. We are going to talk about savings, as well as, here's the big thing I'm going to introduce, compound interest. That, my friends, can be your best friend if we understand the power of compound interest. So with that, I am Eric Hamilton signing off for the Financial Blueprint. Oh, if you have any questions or if you want to be a guest on the show, please shoot an email to the Hello Mansfield email website. Thank you.